Are you having trouble selecting a color palette for your brand? In this video, I'm going to walk you through my process and provide you with some free guides so you can follow along. Now before we get started, I want to let you know that you can download all of my guides for free from my website, brycetufts.com, under the Resources tab. The color palette is probably the most powerful tool that your brand has. A good color palette creates instant recognition for your brand, separates you from other brands in your space, and communicates your values. Choosing the right color palette can be a seemingly daunting task. However, there are some tools and techniques that we can use to help us along the way. Thousands and thousands of brands have used color to alter the perception of their brand. You might have heard that McDonald's uses bright reds or bright yellows to make you hungry, or that insurance companies and banks use blues to make you trust them more. That theory is based off of this sheet right here, in which each color is assigned an inherent value. However, this sheet is only somewhat accurate. While it may represent what our culture is most familiar with as a whole, color is much more subjective than this. We have to remember that colors mean different things to different groups of people. So depending on the group that we're trying to target with our brand, the effectiveness of those colors can change. Things like age, gender, and most importantly, culture will change how the colors we choose are perceived. For example, let's say that you're trying to target the against-the-grain West Coast adventurer. The colors chosen by most corporations and franchises are going to alienate them because they're too standardized. They would likely resonate with a color palette that blatantly does the exact opposite of what these corporations and franchises would choose. In this way, the color palette directly speaks to the group's values by defying the status quo. However, large corporations will most likely go with the bright and standardized color palette because it looks most familiar and trustworthy to the people they do business with. When considering the colors that you should use for your brand, you should take into consideration what those colors mean to the greater society, but most importantly, focus on how to present those colors in a way that they represent your brand's values. Color is also used to show you where to look. In this graphic, we can see dozens of the exact same symbol laid out. The one that stands out is the one that's a different color. Take into consideration the colors your competitors are using, and then look at colors on the opposite end of the spectrum. This could very well influence how recognizable your brand is. At this point, it would be good for us to know some color terms. Now, there are many systems for creating color. In this video, we're going to use the hue, saturation, and brightness method. So the first term is hue, and a hue represents all of the colors on the visible light spectrum. As we move up and down the spectrum, we'll see the entire range of hues visible by the human eye. Next up, we have saturation, and saturation describes the potency of a color. The more highly saturated color is, the more it's described as being intense or rich. The more low saturated color is, the more it's described as being neutral or muted. Lastly, we have our brightness or value, and this attribute describes the brightness of your color, with a low value being close to black and a high value being the brightest version of the color. Now, when we choose our color palette, we want to make sure that we find colors with a hue, saturation, and brightness value that complement and contrast each other. If they're too close together, they're going to clash and make designs that don't look very good. So make sure if you have really bright or rich colors selected, that you have some neutral and dark colors to contrast them so they pair well together. Next up, we want to consider different color palettes and how they work. Just like how individual colors can have their inherent meanings, so can combinations of colors. The palette that we choose is going to depend on how those colors fall on the color wheel and relate to each other. Here are some common palettes used. First, we have monochromatic, which is a color palette based on a single hue. Next up is complementary, and these are colors located on the opposite side of the wheel from each other. Next, we have base complementary, and this is where you select one color and pair it with the two colors surrounding its opposite on the wheel. Next is analogous, and this is based off of colors that are located next to each other on the color wheel. Next is triadic, and this is where we've selected three colors that are equal distance from each other on the wheel, and this works best when we select one color to be the primary that leads the others. Next up are square or tetradic color palettes, and this is where we select two sets of complementary colors that when connected on the color wheel create a square or rectangle. These are also best used if we select one primary color to lead the other three. Now, each of these palettes have different perceptions based on their historic use in society. For example, we might associate monochromatic color palettes with 19th century propaganda, or triadic color schemes with standardized, widely appealing organizations. Next up, we want to take into consideration the real-world attributes of color. So ask yourself, how is color used in my organization? And there can be thousands of things to think about here. If you have a brand that creates and distributes printed products, it may be a mistake to choose a color palette with dark backgrounds and red text, because that's going to increase your printing costs and strain your viewers' eyes. However, let's say that your organization has a fleet of vehicles and you make all of those vehicles white or brightly colored. they're going to get dirty much faster, and if you're trying to present yourself as a clean organization, you're going to want to take that into consideration. Next up, we want to take into consideration color context. Now, most of our senses are based more heavily on perception than reality, and this is the same with sight. As you can see here, both of these blocks are the exact same color, but they look different depending on if they're on a light or dark background. Color changes based on our perception. Now we'll move into selecting the colors for our brand, and thankfully there's a few tools to help us out. Now, probably the most powerful tool available to you, and the one that I use most often, is Adobe Color, and you can access this at color.adobe.com. As you can see, we can select and adjust colors live on the color wheel. We can even go over to the left and select different color palettes like the ones that we talked about earlier in this video. And we can adjust the hue, saturation, and brightness of each of these colors until we have the perfect combination. If opening up this color wheel is still overwhelming to you, there's actually a little cheat that I use to help me get started. Let's say that I find this photo online and I really like the colors in it and I feel like they could work for my brand. We can actually go to Adobe Color, go to Extract Theme, select this file, and when it opens, Adobe Color is actually going to select a theme from this photo. We can even adjust some of the settings right here to look at different themes that it could extract. Now, if we want to adjust this color palette, all we have to do is go back to the color wheel and we can adjust each individual color here. Now let's say that we've selected our final color palette and we're ready to get moving on all of our branded content. But we still have some work to do. Unfortunately, selecting the colors is only the first part in this process. Now we need to record the colors so that we can communicate and share them with others. To do this, I have included the color selection sheet that I created and use. You can download this off my website, bricetufts.com, under the Resources tab. If we open this up, you can see that I've divided the sheet into 3 different sections: color codes, logo use, and design use. The first and most important section that I've included here is your color codes. Now, having your color codes is essential to making sure that your colors look the same across all mediums. Now, there's 4 main codes that you're going to want to make sure are recorded, and most design programs will show you these codes if you select a color. So the first code here is your RGB code, and this stands for red, green, and blue. Computer screens use a process called additive color, where they use thousands of pixels made up of red, green, and blue lights. Each of these lights can shine at a value between 0 and 255, and depending on the combination of those codes, it can create any color we need. So we want to make sure that we record the correct value for each one of these colors. Now, the next code that you want to keep recorded is called your CMYK code, and this is a code that printers use in order to go through a method called subtractive color. In subtractive color, printers will mix a variety of inks to get your perfect color onto printed materials. The inks that the printers mix are cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Now, each of these inks are mixed to a certain percentage, so you want to make sure that you record that percentage on the appropriate color. Now, the next code on the sheet is referred to as the hex code, and the hex code is used in web design or programming to reference a specific color. You're going to want to make sure that you have this code if you're planning on having any web design or programming work done. Now, the next code on this list is your Pantone color code, and this code tells painters exactly how to mix their paint so that it's the exact color that you need. Now, this color is especially important if you're planning on painting your office, vehicles, or ordering physical products. Now, you can find your Pantone color code by simply selecting your hex code, going to Pantone.com, going to the Convert section, selecting hex code, pasting, and then searching. Once you've searched your colors, you can look through the different options that the website has provided and find the one that's the closest match. Once you've found the best match, you can go ahead and enter your Pantone color code right here. Now, in the next section here, we have logo use, and this just shows people how to use your colors in the context of the logo. Now, the next section here is the design use section. What we want to do here is show people how they can use the colors when designing for our brand. Now, the main things we want to show here is how much of each color to use, which colors should overlap, and where we should put our accent colors. And with that, you should have a completed color selection sheet that you can distribute to other people and make sure that your brand colors remain consistent after you select them. Thank you so much for watching this video. If it was helpful to you, please leave a like, and if you have any questions about the branding process, please comment them below. Also, like I mentioned earlier, I have a library of free resources on my website, bricetufts.com, under the Resources tab. There you'll find workbooks, worksheets, and guides to help you along your process. And lastly, this video is part 11 in a series that I'm doing where I design a brand from beginning to end and take you through the process. If you'd like to see more of those videos, please subscribe to the channel and I'll be posting them soon. Thank you for watching this video. It means so much to me. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.